Okay, let's see how the poll is going. Well, the 30th anniversary is coming up in July, so... Oh... Welcome to A Line Through Time, where I take the time to look through your favourite franchises and work out how it all lines up. A while ago I made a poll to determine the next episode, which Metal Gear won by quite a lot. But then I realised Metal Gear's 30th anniversary was coming up 3 months later, and I did feel conflicted about it. So I asked if people thought I should wait for the anniversary or just do it now, because I wanted to make sure it was okay with you guys first. Basically everyone who replied said to wait, so I guess I'll cover one of the other choices first. inFAMOUS. Welcome back, fuckers. Yeah, I knew you'd be back, you fucking sheep. I know Metal Gear should be next, but fuck you, it's my show, I do what I want. If you can't handle that, you can fuck right off, because you need me a lot more than I need you faggots. So sit down, shut up, and blandly accept what I tell you about inFAMOUS. And this is why binary moral choice systems are stupid. It's either saint or cunt. The reason I bring this up is because inFAMOUS is a series that is kinda based around it. I'm not going to complain much more about it, but it's relevant to this episode since we're going to discuss the alternate endings to some degree as well. So, inFAMOUS is a superhero/supervillain sandbox game released in May 2009, approximately 2 weeks before Prototype, oddly enough, which can be described with the exact same terminology. inFAMOUS presents the player with a number of choices that affect the karma rating of protagonist Cole McGrath, which in turn affects the evolution of his powers and later the ending, leading to either a good or evil ending. No neutral ending because neutrality is for pussies or something. Naturally, the good ending is canonical, as tends to be the case, see future episode for more. But before we move on, we need to discuss the game's antagonist, Kessler. If you're concerned about spoilers, then what the fuck are you even doing here, idiot? Kessler, it turns out, is actually Cole from the future. The entire game takes place in a second timeline. In Kessler's timeline, after Cole married his girlfriend Trish and had 2 daughters, an unstoppable entity known as the Beast showed up and annihilated Empire City. After losing his wife and kids, Cole went back in time to push his past self to become stronger so he can pose a threat to the Beast. His second timeline counterpart ultimately proves stronger and defeats him in the climax. Pretty clever writing there. Before we learned if Kessler's plan saw success beyond boosting Cole's powers, there was a 4-chapter DC comic series released through IGN the following month. inFAMOUS Post Blast follows Cole and supporting character John White from the prologue to just before the first mission a few weeks later. Really, it's just promotional material to establish the major characters and premise of the game, so there's not much to discuss. March 2011 saw DC produce a 6-issue miniseries simply titled inFAMOUS, which picks up 4 days after the game concludes, with Cole dealing with the loss of his girlfriend, the betrayal of his best friend, and the remnants of Kessler's influence. June then saw the release of inFAMOUS 2, which sees the Beast arrive, kick Cole's ass, destroy Empire City and everyone in it, and reduce Cole's powers to square one, effectively invalidating every choice Cole made in the first game. Good job. So Cole flees to a new city, gets his powers back, and gets to choose a second element that is bafflingly given a karma rating. In the end, the Beast turns out to be John White, who was thought dead and is actually trying to activate all superpowered people, named conduits, because only they can survive a plague that kills non-conduits. Cole then has to choose whether to sacrifice all conduits including himself to save humanity, or become the Beast and activate the conduits at the cost of humanity. Strangely, both endings are legitimate choices, well written, adequately conclusive, and emotional, which is a fucking miracle for a game with multiple endings. There is technically a third branch stemming from inFAMOUS 2 Festival of Blood, a standalone expansion that sees Cole turn into a vampire and having to track down his sire before the night ends. It's kinda suggested that Zeke was making the whole thing up, but it also makes out that vampires are real anyway, but it does technically exist in its own reality, so I'll include it. Anyway, 2014 saw the series debut on PS4 with the launch title inFAMOUS Second Son. The good ending to the second game really should have ended the series, and I've been told Second Son was planned to follow the evil ending, but they settled on Cole remaining good to the end, but somehow both conduits and humans continue to exist, and I don't think it's ever really addressed. With Cole dead, we get a new protagonist, Delsin Rowe, a Native American played by Troy Baker, because of course he fucking is, whose power is to absorb other people's powers. Conduits are effectively the X-Men now, hunted for being different, labelled as bioterrorists. One such conduit, Brooke Augustine, uses her concrete powers to hunt down other conduits for the government and leaves shards of concrete in the bodies of Delsin's tribesmen. Delsin follows her to Seattle to copy her powers and save his people. The endings here boil down to expose Augustine's secrets and return home a hero, or kill her and be banished from the tribe, leading to Delsin killing them all in a fit of rage. Sadly, the evil ending doesn't feel like a legitimate conclusion the way the second games did. The Cole's Legacy DLC, which I have to mention because I know someone will if I don't, takes place during the main game and reveals a little more about what's been going on between the games and confirms that Cole dies a hero in the second game. And no, they still don't really explain humans and conduits existing together. Later that year, a standalone expansion was released called inFAMOUS First Light. Get it? Because it's set before Second Son, so it's First Light? Fuck you, I think it's clever. First Light follows Second Son supporting character Abigail Fetch Walker, setting up her confinement at the start of the game after she accidentally kills her brother and later gets revenge on the drug dealer who's responsible. Being a prequel with a predetermined outcome, there are no moral choices, leaving only the one ending of Fetch getting her revenge and being arrested. And that's it for inFAMOUS. No, I'm not discussing the browser and Facebook games. Sucker Punch have done basically nothing since First Light. There's no follow-up to Second Son, but we can make an educated guess based on the history of the series, the conclusiveness of only one of the endings, and the typical practices of the rest of the gaming industry, and assume that the good ending will be canonical if the series ever continues. Now, time frame. inFAMOUS 2 takes place 2 months after the death of Kessler in the first game. During inFAMOUS 2, we see a check dated February 6, 2011, set in inFAMOUS 1 in late 2010 and 2 in early 2011. The opening text crawl of Second Son refers to the event of the second game as taking place 7 years ago, placing Delsin's story in 2018. First Light's main event outside of the framing device occurred 2 years prior, while the device itself leads directly into the events of Second Son, so 2016. Additionally, Delsin is 24 during Second Son, so we can assume he was born in 1994. Cole was 27 at the time of his death in 2011, placing his birth in 1984, and let's throw in Fetch, who is a year younger than Delsin. Also, Fetch mentions that she and her brother spent a few years on the move between awakening her powers and the events of First Light. She was evidently still a teen back then based on her looks and her still living with her parents, but she also grew up knowing conduits did still exist, so it was also sometime after inFAMOUS 2. My best guess is that she was 18 at the time, 2 years after Cole's death, and one after Augustine sets up the BUP to allow knowledge of conduit survival to spread and to give her some time living in that environment. Honestly, I don't think the writers really thought it through and they chose a 7-year gap instead of, I don't know, 20? As for Kessler's timeline, the exact time frame isn't very clear. In the second timeline, Cole's powers are activated by the Ray Sphere, whose production Kessler accelerated through his interference, so we can probably assume Kessler's powers awoke later on. Likewise, John White becomes the Beast in inFAMOUS 2 thanks to the Ray Sphere. The Dead Drop audio files kind of imply that Kessler knows John is the Beast, but most of inFAMOUS 1 is exclusive to the second timeline because Kessler causes a lot of what happens as part of his grand plan. The only known catalyst for awakening conduit genes prior to Cole's death are the Ray Sphere and the Beast, who was created by the Ray Sphere, meaning that Kessler's powers awoke thanks to a Ray Sphere that came later, since he did have them by the time the Beast arrived. The cast of Second Son, meanwhile, operate more like mutants from Marvel, powers awoken during adolescence or through emotional stress, so it seems that the Ray Sphere is only a method of prematurely activating conduits rather than being uniquely capable of doing so. So Kessler's powers awoke sometime after Cole's, either naturally or through a Ray Sphere. Since we have no given dates for this, let's assume that without Cole's activation of the Ray Sphere causing the blast which claimed the life of Trish's sister, Cole and Trish's relationship progressed to the point of marriage around the time of the second game in 2011, since that gives them a few months to prep. Their daughters, seemingly twins, look around 5 or so when the Beast arrives, so we'll say that's late 2016. Cole and his family are on the run for some time before the Beast catches up, which we'll say is early to mid 2017. Cole then travels back in time, probably still in 2017. As for when he arrives, his first act is to usurp control of the First Sons in a coup, seeing then leader Richard Tate's son Alden kicked out onto the streets as a child. Alden then appears in the first game as an old man, raising all sorts of questions about Kessler's age. Kessler was already in his early 30s when he left, so an extra 50 or 60 years on top of that is kinda ridiculous. So let's be generous, since all of this needs to occur between Kessler's arrival and the game, and say that Alden was around 10 years old when his father died, and that the stress of living rough, coupled with his powers, makes him look older than he actually is, say around 40. If 30 years have passed and Kessler departed from 2017 at age 33, he is 63 by the time he fights Cole in the first game's climax. I think that sounds reasonable because much older, and you'd have serious doubt he could hold his own against Cole in his prime. So using this time frame, we could place Kessler's arrival as occurring in 1981. 36 years is an odd choice for time to travel back though, so let's up that to 40 since he had no specific destination as far as we know, placing his arrival in 1977. This makes him 67, which is still kinda reasonable, and also adds a tiny bit more credibility to Alden's age, which is now 43. I admit there's not a whole lot to the series timeline besides working through the poorly thought out time frame, but again, I'm focusing on simpler stuff to get back into the swing of things. But don't worry, we'll get back to the complicated stuff later on this series. But for now, the inFAMOUS timelines go a little something Like this. Timeline number 1. 1984. Cole McGrath is born. 2011. Cole marries his girlfriend Trish Daly and the couple produce 2 daughters. Cole's conduit gene later triggers, granting him control over electricity. 2016. A powerful conduit dubbed the Beast appears in Empire City. Cole and his family flee while the Beast annihilates the city. 2017. The Beast pursues Cole and catches up with him, killing Trish and their daughters. Distraught, Cole uses his powers to travel back in time as the Beast devastates the Earth. Timeline number 2. 1977. Cole adopts the name Kessler and usurps control of the First Sons. He begins development of the race very early and forms plans to make his counterparts stronger. 1984. Cole McGrath is born. 1999. Delsin Rowe is born in Salmon Bay. 1995. Abigail Fetch Walker is born in New Jersey. 2010. The First Sons complete development and testing on the Racesphere. Kessler hires Cole to deliver the Racesphere, detonating it in a densely populated area and causing an event known as the Blast. The Blast claims thousands of lives, introduces Rayfield Plague to the surviving population, and triggers Cole's conduit gene, granting him control of electricity. Empire City is quickly quarantined. Cole is assisted by NSA agent John White as he eliminates the various factions within the city and destroys the Racesphere, the latter seemingly costing John's life. After Kessler murders Trish to strengthen Cole's resolve, Cole confronts Kessler and kills him, learning of the Beast and the previous timeline in the process. Cole continues his campaign against the First Sons and destroys the remnants of Kessler's experiments. 2011. A revived John White transformed into the Beast and destroys Empire City. Cole flees south to New Marais to prepare for the inevitable rematch. After Cole deals with the villainous factions of the city, John reveals himself to Cole and explains his plan to sacrifice non-conduits to awaken dormant conduits so they can survive the plague. Cole uses the Rayfield inhibitor to kill every conduit on the planet, ending the threat of the plague for good. Cole is posthumously honoured as a hero. 2012. Following the emergence of new conduits, Brooke Augustine forms a Department of Unified Protection to capture and detain new conduits now dubbed bioterrorists. 2013. After awakening her neon powers, Fetch runs away from home with her brother Brent. 2016. While being forced to work for a drug lord named Shane, Fetch is drugged by Shane and accidentally kills Brent. Fetch is arrested by the DUP and taken to learn to control her powers at the Code & K Conduit Prison. 2018. Augustine arranges an opportunity for Fetch to avenge her brother by killing Shane, which she accepts. While being transported to Seattle, Fetch, Eugene Sims, and Hank Daughtry escape their transport. Hank encounters Delsin Rowe, whose power to replicate other powers manifests by copying Hank's smoke power. Augustine tortures the Akomish tribe for information, leaving concrete embedded in their bodies. Delsin pursues Augustine to Seattle to copy her powers and undo the damage. By acquiring the assistance and powers of the other conduits in the city, Delsin defeats Augustine and acquires her powers. He exposes the DUP's actions and ushers in an age of coexistence between conduits and non-conduits. inFAMOUS has some questionable decisions made surrounding its time frame, but it's a fun series with some incredibly creative uses of the protagonist's powers. I'm really surprised there hasn't been any kind of PS4 remaster release or collection yet, but if we never get a new one, I'm happy leaving the story on Delsin's chapter. Still, given the very obvious comic book inspiration for the series, you know what would be a really cool idea? A Crisis story with all the different versions of Cole and Delsin, maybe even new ones we haven't seen yet, like an established character as they exist in the timeline following inFAMOUS 2's evil ending. How cool would that be? Who knows, maybe that's what the devs have been cooking up all this time during the radio silence. Wouldn't that be one hell of a sucker punch? Oh.
Kill all sons of bitches. That's my official instructions.